Namaste, Radhe.
Namaste, Meenakshi. How are you doing?
Doing very good. Can you hear me well, Radhe?
I can.
Lovely. So we will get started just a minute. So
Sure.
we are already casting our interview. Sorry about the echo in the background. It was the YouTube which was up.
Oh, no problem. I don't hear the echo. I'm
How are
assuming
you
you can hear me okay?
Yes, very good. Now we will get started with the recording. Let people come in. We'll do a very quick mantra, Radhe, and then we'll get started with that. Namaste, Dr. Charak.
Hi, Dr. Charak.
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ओम्. Welcome, Radhe, to Arsha Jyotish platform. We'll talk about, at the same time, welcome everyone to be able to see Radhe, talk to Radhe, understand, get to know the journey of Radhe. So I will start with my own, the thrilling experience which I had with Radhe, and before I get into her formal introduction of her. And I also see Dr. Charak in the background. So,
Okay.
Dr. Charak, I do like you to speak a little bit about Radhe when we are talking about medical astrology and her association. However, you would like to add, would like to also request you in the middle for a while. So, as we are getting started with Radhe, and I was very thrilled to even know that I know Radhe. More I read book, more I get to know a deep study how it has gone into. So in the second part of the interview, we will get a lot into the book. In the beginning, the way it is laid out, in the beginning, we will talk a lot about the Radha itself, how she was, how she got inspiration into the Vedic astrology. I see her coming from a corporate finance background, and she moved into a completely different direction, and then association with medical relief, and that's how I got associated with her. And more I more know, more I am more thrilled to know her personally. So with that, I would like to share my screen and get started, talk about Radhe. So here we go. So, Radhe, we are talking about you, who holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BA in finance from the University of the Southern California. And you have spent around 25 years in the financial industry, financial services industry, in the various senior management positions. And then we saw in 2007, when the time moved on, when you left the business world, started studying Ayurveda full-time with Dr. Vasant Lal. Then we see, and we will get into the journey of that one too, and how that started. And while being there, you also got into Jyotish for multiple years. And then came a book, the book about the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras. And I will also say, and I was looking through the book of the divine forces on the lunar nakshatra, I also saw a couple of other books also came, I think just before that. We'll get into the journey of that one too. And then in the same time, I see that you have also traveled to India, met Dr. Charak, and then another inspiring journey started where you also shared your interest with SOS Memorial Trust and attended the medical camp over there, got the inspiration, came to US, and then came the Sanjeevani Foundation. So incredible journey from the Radhe side. So I will quickly remove this out of the way. Mm. So Radhe, as we are getting into all of this, we would like to know what was your inspiration? Like we could see that you are a MBA in 25 years in the finances. Was there anything inspiration as you were growing up as a child that you want to get into Vedic sciences, or have you heard about it? But how did it got started?
Thank you, Meenakshi. And I just want to, before I start, also thank you and your team and all the great work that you've been doing these past few years to help the cause, Dr. Charak and his medical team, and to raise funds. So very, very thankful. And also for you putting this particular webinar together. So thank you, Meenakshi. I would say, in looking back, which is, many, many years ago at this point in my life, there wasn't anything particular during my childhood that would draw me to the Vedic sciences and to India. But I do remember around my 20s, late 20s and into my 30s, I had almost forgotten about this until you asked. I had actually visited India for the first time with my folks. And there was something that really drew me to the country. We were only there for 3 or 4 days, but the dreams that I had, they were almost like past life dreams. And I felt very connected to India and to the people. And then came back and, at the point around that time, probably my early 30s, began reading books written by Sri Aurobindo on integral yoga, and so started to get more involved in the spiritual paths associated with India and very specifically integral yoga. But also I remember, and it must be grace, I remember Sri Ganesha coming into my life very strongly around my 30s. And just then this flood of other Hindu gods and goddesses, Sri Krishna very strongly, Hanumanji, Saraswati. I mean, it was just a very, very magical time for me. And my interest, my feelings towards India just kind of grew throughout this period, even though I was in the business or the corporate world. And then really what changed, again, all my readings and the lords, the deities, India, all this was part of me during my corporate life. But it came a time in my early 40s when the company I was working with at that time was sold. I was actually about mid 40s. And I decided at that point to take a break from the corporate world. And at that point, I moved to Albuquerque and spent 2 years studying under Dr. Lad in his Ayurvedic Institute there. So that brought in sort of Ayurveda. I had been studying Jyotish before that. Hadn't met Dr. Charak yet. I think I first met him around that time, 2007, 2008. Traveled to India. Had a real fascination with medical astrology. And so he was very gracious in inviting me over to his flat in the evenings to discuss medical astrology. And it was really during that period that I became aware of his work with these amazing medical camps. He spent some time showing me several pictures of camps that he had been doing at the time. I had asked him if anybody in the U.S. was raising money for these camps, and he said no. And so we sort of agreed at that point in time, that was actually 2007, that I would come back and set up a non-for-profit organization and would work in the U.S. to try to raise money for his medical camps. And the foundation is Samjeevani Foundation, and have been doing that now ever since 2007.
Lovely, lovely. So, as we are talking about these things in 2007, where did you get the inspiration towards a beautiful book? Like, I am holding that book in front of me, where we see there is a big detail. Like, it does require somebody to do a deeper study in Puranas, go there and be able to look into this. So, have you studied Sanskrit as a part of the Ayurveda and the Jyotish as well? And that's where you got inspiration to start, reading the Puranas to get into this one. So why Lunar Nakshatras book and this digging further into this area?
Good question, Meenakshi. But while you'll have that book up, I will just mention, and I'm sure Meenakshi will mention it later also, that this, anyone that may be interested that hasn't read or purchased the book and would like to, all the proceeds will go to the medical relief. Samjeevani Foundation. So she'll be giving kind of a how to contact her after this webinar, towards the end of the webinar. But wanted to mention that while you still had that book up. For me, I'll tell you, it was really Jyotish that where I got my inspiration. I did not know anything about Western astrology, so my first entry into astrology was through Jyotish, and it was just fascinating to me to read and learn about these lunar nakshatras and to read about the godheads that rule over them and their special characteristics, personalities, attributes, and how they influence the planets. This was just truly unique to me and very wonderful. And I learned, from that also the importance of these lunar nakshatras in India in general, in terms of how a baby's name is determined based on the moon's nakshatra. Many festivals and holidays that are celebrated based on moon being a particular lunar nakshatras, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Symmetry for marriages. And so I went on sort of a quest to read as much as I could on these nakshatras. And at that point, and at that time in the US, the books that were readily available were those written by a few other great Jyotishis, Vamadeva, Dr. Frawley, who had written some, Dennis Harness had written a book. And everything I read was just, deep in my interest and curiosity about the nakshatras. And many of the stories that were told were from the Puranas. All right. So what kind of my curiosity or my inspiration for doing many years, 3, 4, 5 years of research that ended up going into this book was, one, I wanted to see, if I could go back in time before the Puranas, how far back in India's, spiritual history do we find these nakshatra lords and goddesses, and what were their original portrayals, in these ancient scriptures, and what were their earliest myths, and how did they transform over time to what we all know and read about in the Puranas, which were readily available to everyone. So, it meant that I would have to go back and start with the Rig Veda, which I had already had a set of the 10 mandalas, had not read much, but at least they were on my bookshelf and it was a place for me to start. And I think the second inspiration was just this curiosity or this deep need to understand why these particular 28 godheads. I mean, India has millions of godheads. Why these 28 as rulers of the nakshatras that are so critical in Vedic astrology? And certainly each one in its own right are important, or is an important godhead, but why them collectively as a group? How were these godheads determined? And so, and there were a few other questions, but I couldn't find the answer. So I just, again, went into deep study for 2 or 3 years, starting back with the Rig Veda and moving through to the other Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, the Brahmanas, the epics, and then to the Puranas. So really kind of covered almost 3,000 years of spiritual scriptures and trying to trace these godheads. To come back to your question on Sanskrit, I knew some Sanskrit. I had taken a couple of years of Sanskrit, but the most, at least the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda, most of these Vedas are available in English, although the translation is not as accurate as we would probably like. So I did at one point work with a Sanskrit scholar to go back through and really kind of understand from the original language how these verses, the mantras, the riks translated. So I did end up supplementing that with some help on the Sanskrit side.
Lovely, very lovely to hear that about this. So the question which is coming in my mind when we are talking about this is, we always, I just want to make sure everybody is muted. Yes. So there is I will say, a open discussion between a Western mind and Eastern mind. Like, so it's an open discussion. It's more of, can nakshatras be applied to the Vedic astrology, the horoscopes, or not? How complex it is, how much of a information it is. So with that, let me just also talk a little bit more about book, and I will just add to what Radhe has already talked about. I am already getting a lot of orders for this book. This book is so popular, and there is a list of reviews which you can find on Amazon, especially the time when it came. Right now we have multiple books on nakshatras, but the time when it came, it was one of the big inspiration, especially how it is compiled from the Puranas. The original text came from there. And, and as you can see, we have a participation coming from France, Austria, and people know you more with the book. So, and they asked me multiple questions before the hand, and the time I said that Radhe is going to be interviewed, like as if from somewhere from the cave Radhe is coming out, which is not known to the world. And multiple questions came in to me in terms of, can somebody dig further? It's a rich text book. So I will ask you something about that one too. While my thing is also about, people talk about this Eastern mind and the Western mind. And sometimes they say that nakshatra is not meant for Western mind. What do you, and you did the whole dig in this one. So, I mean, I will not get into this, like how much information it has. So what do you think the kind of challenges you faced when you started to even look into this, the Puranas, and trying to get into the nakshatras? Did you find it like challenging? Did you find it like easy? You are getting into a completely different world. What was your point of view?
Obviously, any deep spiritual scripture can be challenging to make your way through, especially, the Rig Veda, because when I had first heard about the Rig Veda, so this, I'm sure everybody here knows, that's the oldest spiritual scripture in India and possibly the world. And it's composed of about 1,000 riks, 1,000 hymns, to various godheads. And the Rig Veda was really cognized by rishis, by about 400, 500 rishis, but principally about 6 or 7 rishis and their family. So it's a very holy and a very sacred text, and it's very mystical. So when I had mentioned even before I started this research that I had them on my bookshelf, these 10 mandalas. And when I first bought them and read some of the mantras, some of the rigs, it was so odd to me, Meenakshi. It was praying to the river, praying to the sun god. It was something that was very difficult to grasp and understand the meaning behind it. And as you probably know, some of the Westerners that first translated the Rig Veda really discredited this very holy text and said it was very barbaric. This is worshiping nature. So they did a huge disservice, and that's probably why this feeling that it wasn't meant for the Western world. But as you kind of open your mind a bit and move kind of beyond your own immediate knowledge and understanding, it just opens up to you. It's the most beautiful, mystical, spiritual text I have ever read. And these rishis, they're short sutras, so you also have to sort of meditate on 1 or 2 hymns at a time, and then start to see the connection between these godheads and really the symbolism that was being used through nature and through these godheads and the powers that they had. So yes, the Rig Veda, absolutely, and certainly as you move to the Yajur Veda, I was not familiar with many of the yajnas that were done during the Brahmana's time. And so to dive into the Yajur Veda and associated brahmanas, wow, just a whole nother world opened up, specifically to these godheads and the roles that they play at the Somya Yajna, at these other yajnas, the nakshatras that had to be kind of aligned for specific pujas or yajnas to be done. I mean, it was just, I reached a point where it just started to open, Meenakshi. It was certainly a struggle, and that's why it took 4 or 5 years. But after a year or two, things just kind of started to come together, and one after another, things would open. And it was, I'll just share a very personal thing. It was during probably the toughest time in my life that I was involved in this book, Saturn Return. And Saturn, not a particularly good planet for several reasons in my chart, and really went through a burn, went through a loss of just about everything in my life except my family. And what I found is I had this book and these godheads stayed with me for those 2-3 years that I had to go through this, and I just buried myself in it. I would just wake up in the morning and boom, right to my desk, right into research. I would go to bed thinking about the Vedas. I would dream about them. I would wake up with their names on my lips. I just immersed myself, and so they helped me through just a very, very difficult period. And I know that may sound a little strange, but this is how it was with me. I mean, it was a real spiritual journey that I don't think I would have gotten through without the research that I was doing and without these godheads, understanding who they are and their stories and feeling they were right there with me the whole time. So I don't know if I answered your question, Meenakshi, but
no, you did answer the question, and that is where my next question comes. This is in the whole horoscope analysis. People come back and ask this question, which you talked about, the Saturn period. And this particular period is when we are talking to people, they say, am I getting punished or am I learning something? Once you come out of it, you go back to that time and you say, yes, I learned the lesson. This was good for me. Something came out because I got the stamina to do my work, and that whole strength came from the Saturn being around me. While when you pass through, despite knowing it's the lesson getting learned in your life, we came into the earth to do something, and here we go. from your learning about the Saturn being there, do you want to communicate some message to people that yes, it's a part of life, it goes on, or how do you like to communicate to the people who are passing through their Saturn, like maybe a big sadhyasati, that 2.5 years, which is the intense time. So, do you have any learning from there which you'd like to pass on to others to hold on?
Well, I guess I would say a couple things. I was obviously already a Jyotishi at the time that I was getting that Saturn return, and I had been warned by my teachers, this time is coming up. And I felt invincible. I thought, no, no, won't happen to me. I know Saturn, I know my chart. I really felt that it reminds me of a story that I won't go into, but of Agni hiding at the bottom of the ocean during his sati sati to try to avoid Saturn. And after that 2.5 year period, he came up and he said, "See, Saturn has had no effect on me." And I think it was Vishnu or Brahma said, "But yeah, you had to spend 2.5 years at the bottom of the ocean." Right. So you have to go into it kind of knowing that, being aware, if you know your chart, if you have an astrologer, of being aware of what can come up. Certainly there will be challenges, I can guarantee you, but interestingly enough, there can also be very great rises during Saturn's period, depending on what he represents in your chart. If he's involved in great yogas, there can be wealth, there can be fame, there can be all these things, as well as illness and obstacles and challenges. So we don't want to give Saturn kind of a bad rap. It really comes down to the individual charts. But he is said to be the most spiritual graha, and I believe that. That's because, as you were mentioning, these lessons that we learn. And it's sort of like, we have to learn the hardest way possible. We have to actually go through it, and not just stand back and say, I can get around this. Sometimes we actually have to go through the experiences to learn from actually living it. So yeah, each planet, each graha can bring some challenges and struggles depending on your chart. But Saturn is well known for being unique. So yeah, I would just say absolutely there's going to be some challenges and obstacles, but there's also going to be some, depending on the chart, some very positive things that will come out. And would also say, well, at least he only comes around every 28 years or so. So when he comes, in whatever area of the chart he's in, he's there to have you review that area of your life and to make sure that you're aligned in those areas of your life. And so if you ignore him and you simply go, nope, I'm not making any changes in life, and I'm just going to kind of move on, and these couple years will pass. Next time he comes around, it will be double trouble. So he's there to make us, kind of give us this opportunity to really review that area of life and make any changes that's necessary, what's working and what's not working. And if you kind of hide in fear and want to cling to the present and not make changes, it's going to be a tough time. But otherwise, he really realigns us, gives us a chance to kind of realign to our truth, if you will.
Does it make you more spiritual, more connected?
Well, I think anytime you go through difficulties in life, you start to wonder, what is this all about? Why is this happening to me? All the standard things. And in that way, absolutely, it gives you kind of a jolt and kind of look for a higher meaning in life, to get beyond some of this day-to-day drama that goes on, if you will. So absolutely, I think with the lessons that he brings and the opportunity to kind of stand back and understand and question what's really important in life, he can absolutely be a spiritual graha. But they all can be. So not just Saturn. I think every planet has kind of a spiritual message that they bring to us.
Lovely. So, Radhe, that is where I'm getting into one more point as on the book. So, book has a lot of stories, and do you have any? I will say a particular story which you think that really inspired me to get started with this, or anything we would like to share from the story part of the book, which makes this book really interesting, with making it more comprehensive. I will say reference at the same time. Is anything you would like to share? Any stories of kind?
Wow, there's many stories there, and I think each one is very interesting and unique and worth hearing or reading. I think the first, I'll maybe mention just two different things. One, the first thing that really surprised me when I was reading the Rig Veda, which, by the way, is not an astronomical text. So we would not expect to read about the nakshatras or find much about the nakshatras in the Rig Veda, although certainly their godheads we would expect to be mentioned and eulogized. But I remember I was in the 10th mandala, which certainly is said by some to be a later mandala. But there was this hymn it's called the Wedding Sukta. And it's a hymn about the sun's daughter, Surya, marriage to the moon. Soma was the moon was referred to often in the Rig Veda and later texts as Soma. And in this particular wedding sutta, which gets repeated, by the way, in almost all the other Vedas, and particularly in the Atharva Veda, I come across for the first time Magga. The nakshatra Magga is mentioned. And this is the first time that I've seen any of the nakshatras, or that I've recognized any of the nakshatras being mentioned. And the story goes that the sun's daughter, Surya, was married to the moon. And during this sutta, it describes how their marriage, their wedding procession, started in Magga with the approval of the forefathers, right, which Magga represents. And then the actual wedding procession, which led to Soma's home, to her husband's or fiance's home, if you will, took place under the Palgunis. I didn't mention Purva versus Uttara, but it did mention the Palgunis, which follow, obviously, Magga. And who was leading the bridal procession? It was Bhaga and Adiman, who are the lords, the godheads, right, of these Palgunis. And so this was, to me, just amazing that in this scripture, in the spiritual scripture, you would actually have mentions of specific nakshatras. You would have a story that had to do with the nature of those nakshatras, and you would have the godheads associated with those nakshatras as pivotal people or godheads in this particular story. So I think that was one of my kind of most surprising hymns that I came across. And it's long. It's like, I don't know, 47 suktas. It's one of the longer ones. And so they go into the Ashvins and how these Ashvini Kumars were actually the charioteers of Surya. And we know that, you know, it is the Ashvini Kumars who each morning kind of usher in dawn every morning, right? As the sun's coming up, dawn, or we can say the daughter of Surya, is ushered in by these Ashwini Kumars. And that's the same role that they were playing here. They were actually the charioteers of the daughter of the sun, taking them along this bridal procession. So that's one story that I can share. I think the other thing that surprised me a bit, it's less of a story and more about some of the characteristics of these nakshatras. But when I got to I did this sequentially, right? So I started with the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda. Soma Veda is just, they're all hymns to Somya, and it's really 95% a repetition of the ninth mandala, which contains all the hymns to Soma. So I didn't spend a lot of time there, but the Yajur Veda, and then the Atharva Veda, which by this time, you know, I had been studying Ayurveda. And so it was particularly interesting to me because this is the most ancient text on health and healing, although it also includes some other areas. And, you know, sure enough, not only did I find kind of an elaboration of this particular myth or wedding hymn, there was also hymns to each of these godheads. And it gave me, what they did is they correlate particular diseases and illnesses and boons to these nakshatra devatas. So, for instance, Rudra, who is later known as Shiva, right? In the Atharva Veda, it mentions that all his illnesses include those that are associated with extreme conditions, either kind of extreme natural disasters, maybe lightning, hurricanes, flash floods, etc., or kind of really life-threatening injuries. And very specifically, it speaks to poisonous arrows and snake bites and serpent bites, things that just, it fits with Rudra, what we know about Rudra. And it fits with the later Puranic stories about Rudra and his special gift around poison and being able to swallow the poison that came from the churning of the ocean and hold it within his neck. And so the Atharva Veda was another very amazing text to me, because it started now very specifically identifying diseases and illnesses and boons with these nakshatra, and all these nakshatra, just about all the nakshatra devatas are mentioned in the Atharva Veda.
Wow, such a rich text to get into.
It's amazing.
Wow.
It's amazing. I'll tell you. Yeah.
So especially, do you like to say compare? Because as we can see in the background, many of us are the astrology students, and they want to dig further, they want to compare different nakshatras. So do you find anything in the nakshatras of Ketu, Magha, do you think as compared to the nakshatras of say a Rahu, or you are getting into Mars, which is again considered difficult. So do you find it any big difference among them? Like if you are comparing group by group between Ketu nakshatras as compared to Rahu or Mars, or do you go more about one nakshatras compared to other?
Yeah. For me, I have not paid particular attention to that aspect in terms of translating the meaning or impact or significance of that particular planet. I use it more to indicate that, let's say, Ketu is in Sun Nakshatra. I'll use it instead to see, as they run Ketu Dasha, or as Ketu in the chart, natal chart, gets triggered by a transiting planet, what other planet in the chart will get triggered, and in this case, the sun. So I use it for interpretation like that. I'm sure there is, and Dr. Charik is here, and I'm sure everyone has some experience in this area, but it's nothing that I really could see. I have not personally found that correlation, but I know others have and have written about it. So maybe at the right time we can ask Dr. Charik.
Lovely. We will get into that one too with Dr. Charak. We can ask that question. But people try to compare that the Ketu nakshatras, does it give you some of the mental instability to some extent? We heard about Magha, so I just wanted to ask that question, is it what you have also observed? And in general, we not know about Pushya nakshatra, which is a Saturn nakshatra, while the value and the nurturing and how caring it comes from there is very different from any other nakshatras. And while we have been talking about Saturn being difficult for people, while the nakshatra itself is so nurturing and caring. Lovely. So I will just switch a gear a little bit.
So actually, let me mention, Meenakshi, sure. Maybe I misunderstood your question. So what I hear you saying now is, have I done anything around looking at similarities between the Ketu ruled nakshatras or the Mars ruled? No, I have not. But now that you've mentioned it, it's going to be my next research. I'm going to take a look at it, because we would expect there to be, there must be something around their godheads that are going to be similar. So yeah, very interesting. And I'm going to take a look into that and get back to you.
Lovely to hear that. And that is what actually also people have been asking me question about. Like, one of the things the people asked me is, when we are going through this particular book, how like it's not a book that somebody will start to read and finish it in like in few days. While this is a book where you will read, you will understand, you will meditate, and then you will go to the next chapter. Do you think that having an understanding or somebody explaining them more helps them understand it more? So they have been asking me, can you please request Radhe to have some kind of an insight from her side, teaching us about this book? So how do you think people should be utilizing this particular book? Is what I am asking. Is like, take a pause, keep going on, or use this more as a reference when you are come across particular nakshatras, go to the book and then understand about it. Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would start with reading the first couple chapters, which is an overview and an introduction and an explanation of the research that was done, and an explanation. People ask me, why, this is an unusual ordering of the nakshatra godheads. You're not starting with Kritika or Ashwini and going around. You've got all these different groupings, and that was something I felt important to do. I mean, every other book out there, okay, you want to go in order, the books are out there. But for me, because I was very focused on groupings of the godheads as revealed in the Rig Veda and later confirmed through all the other literature, the specialty about particular groups, the Adityas, the Vasus, the Rudras, right? I wanted to, and their stories are similar depending on their group. They're interrelated, if you will. And so I felt the need to instead organize this by these three groups of godheads, plus Prajapati or Brahma and Brihaspati, and Manu were the forefathers. These were the other three. And this is because, so one is because that their stories are alike, and they, the Adityas and Aditi and her sons, the mantras in the Rig Veda kind of come together around these godheads. The Vasus have different rishis that talk about them in different mandalas. Same with the Rudras. And so it was just sort of natural in that it seemed like it corresponded more to the Rig Veda, and where they were really kind of originally birthed, and helps you get a sense of those particular nakshatra godheads related to the group. So instead of looking at all the Ketu ruled nakshatras or Mars ruled nakshatras, I looked at those ruled by the Adityas, those ruled by the Rudras, those ruled by the Vasus, and collected them that way. So I understand that can be a little difficult, but I also did my best to make each chapter as a standalone on that particular godhead, and where I felt there needed to be reference to elaborate on a story or include another story, then I would reference another chapter and say, find the full version of the story here. So yeah, it's not a light read, and maybe it's a book that would put you to sleep at night. I don't know, but that particular organization kind of worked for me and my purpose in writing it, which was to understand why these particular godheads, what's unique about these godheads, and the uniqueness is the groupings. And the uniqueness is that they are the rulers of this Manvantara, of this kind of grand period of over 300 million years. These are the godheads that were chosen to rule over us during this period. And so this becomes especially very important to understand the nature of each of these category gods, if you will.
Great.
Does that help, or just
Yes.
make it more?
No, that does help to give us the sense of it, like how to at least start to utilize the book instead of becoming overwhelmed. There's so much a good amount of information is there, and how to categorize and go for others. So I think
I'll say actually one other thing that's come to mind since you've raised this question. There's a lot in that book, because not only do we have the chapters of each of the godheads, but what I felt was important is, as I came across in my research, sections of the Brahmanas or stories within the Rig Veda, I felt it was, and most of this is the Brahmanas, Taittiriya Brahmana, but also the Yajurveda. I felt it was important to share that with the reader rather than just me interpreting and putting it in the chapter related to the Godhead. This was such a treasure, such a gold mine to find, like this elaborate text about the ishtis, the oblations to the lunar nakshatras in as close of an original translation as possible. Or in some cases, when I came across special sections on the nakshatra or their godheads, I would have my Sanskrit person translate for me. And so I wanted people to read for themselves the original text as close as possible and come to their own conclusions. I put in each of the chapters at the end of each, I say, well, here are some of the characteristics. If you've got, your moon or Rahu, etc., in this nakshatra, that's my interpretation. But I really wanted others to feel the richness, understand the richness of the material that's out there on these nakshatras, to read it for themselves and be able to come to their own conclusions around it. So you'll see, 3 or 4 fairly big sections that are dedicated to the original scriptures that are out there.
Yeah, that is exactly what is visible when you pick up this book, and that's the review I got it from the people, that this is a book which each person who is inspired towards Jyotish should have a copy of it, especially knowing the richness and how you have brought the information, the original text coming from the Puranas, Rig Vedas, which you are talking about. Or in general, it's difficult for people to go to those original texts and be able to do the research towards a particular subject. It's very good to know some of the stories, like, I keep going to, I will say, a Facebook of Dr. Charak's, and then, that's where he come up with a very beautiful stories from there. And they said, like, oh, this is coming from this particular Puranas. But when I go to Puranas, I don't get that story in that format because it requires Dr. Charak's mind to be able to grasp that out of the book. Otherwise, you get lost into the Puranas.
Well, not only that, but the 13 Mahapuranas. I'm sure that Dr. Charak has read every single one of them, and he is bringing to our attention those that are most important and relevant when it comes to the nakshatra godhead. So he's done the work for us, right? And now he can present kind of the gems that come out of the Puranas.
Lovely. As you mentioned, I remember reading a book of Dr. Charak on Surya the god. And I found that all the Puranas, how it has been referred, while the whole book, you can finish it in like 3-4 hours. It has a rich text, and all the references from the Purana, but for you, it's a small recipe which you can just finish up. And it's also a book, not, I will say, for a Jyotish, but it's like it has a less Jyotish, more of Purana's knowledge, which is coming via being like the Surya god, and how the Surya god comes in the people's life. And then it also went to the Surya Namaskar and the yogas, and how a Jyotish student try to connect themselves with the spirituality is also a part of the book. So I get inspired when I see a book which has such a big connection from there, and then a compilation which is ready for us reference. So, definitely like to thank you for bringing this to the community of Jyotish, and people for years to come is getting inspired with this particular book. And I will just remind everyone, and I'm switching gear to get into more of a medical relief and association of Radhe to the Sanjeevani Foundation. This particular book, which we talked a lot about, is on sale, and each penny of this is going to go to donation towards medical relief. So, good deal. $35 book, and everything will be going to the medical relief. And if you want a receipt, just let us know. We will go ahead from there. And you can buy the book from jyotish.com. So you go to the site, get into the book section, you will find it. I will put the link in the chat as well. So with that, Radhe, now I would like to switch a gears towards medical relief. So we talked about in 2007, you being to India, got inspired with the medical camp, and for me, this was like almost 3 years back. I got to know, and I really more I hear about the surgical camp, more I become thrilled that how is it even possible that Dr. Charak and team, they are such an expert surgical doctors group, surgical team, go back to the small villages. They can change like a small school into a surgical place, and they can do operation. So I understand the real meaning behind that, but how did it came in your mind that you will be able to do this, and you will continue to do that from last 16 years or 17 years into that? And can you talk a little bit more about the journey of this one? And again, how got started, we know a little bit more about. So whatever you want to add to that.
Mhm. Sure, sure. Well, yeah, as I think I did mention earlier on when I met Dr. Charik for the first time in New Delhi in his flat, and he was showing me the pictures and explaining the work, charitable work that they were doing out in these small villages that you know people have no access to medical support, to dentists, to doctors, and they would go out 3, 4 times a year. It was very inspiring to me, and I just, I'll tell. I don't know, Dr. Charik, if you remember this or not, but I'll tell just a short story of what really kind of prompted me to come back and want to do whatever I could in a small way to raise money for this cause. When I was at his flat one night, he worked during the day at the hospital, so normally it wouldn't be until 8 or 9 or 10 that he would get home at night. And then myself and my niece, who traveled with me for this first trip to Delhi, would go over. And we were talking about Jyotish and medical astrology and looking at a couple charts that I had. And his phone rang, and he said, well, I'll be back in a second. And he stepped out of the room, and when he came back, he had this like big smile on, and he said, we were supposed to do a medical camp in the next 2 weeks, and we're down to the wire, and we still need a couple $100 more, two, three, $400 more, and we didn't know where we were going to get it from. We had trust that it would come. We knew the divine would come through, but we were kind of getting down to the wire. And he said that call that he had just gotten was from a lady. I actually think the lady may have been in the US. I don't quite remember, but she had pledged $500 towards the next camp. And so now they would be able to go forward with the camp that was being organized in 2 weeks. And I just thought, wow, to be able to go out and do a camp for two, three, $5,000 and help so many people, and not really knowing, where the next funds were going to come from to be able to sponsor the next one, that somehow I could help in this whole process, if nothing else, than to just come back, set up a non-for-profit foundation, and start to reach out to people that knew Dr. Charik, either from his medical background or friends and family, or more importantly, from the Jyotish community here in the US. And things just kind of started unfolding year by year by year, and we were raising money here in the U.S. while he continued to raise money there in India. And I don't think that there was another period in the last 10 or 12 years that they wanted to actually host a medical camp and was unable to do it because of the funding. I mean, people just kind of started contributing, $5 a month, $50 a month, 1,000 here, 500. It was just really amazing to me, because I did nothing. All I did was set up the foundation, and wherever there, Dr. Charik would come over and speak at the ashram there, people would learn about his work in these medical camps and want to start to contribute. So it just, I don't know, there was just something that opened up, and everybody seemed to kind of be inspired and rise to the occasion. So yeah, I mean, there were years where, and there still are years, I work full time. Not a lot. You do more than any of us, Meenakshi. There's many years that all I can do is kind of get some emails out, file the returns, tend to some administrative things. But it's people like Roy that is here. It's people like you that have really kind of committed and dedicated important time to kind of keep this momentum going. So.
Yeah, for me, it was very inspiring, Radhe. The more I hear, more I'm like, I was really nervous that, oh my God, is it even possible to be able to help poor through this way? And we understand, we come from an India background, and we understand when there is a surgical need a family has, how much they really takes out their money, their all the means and ways to all towards doing that particular surgery because it's pretty costly.
Yeah.
And there see Dr. Charak, who is helping people with this way, and knowing the story, how it started with the small medicine, they were giving it to the mount while doing their Monterey trip, and then they got inspired to be able to go there, be able to help them out. That itself was really inspiring for us to do whatever we could do, because the way, especially from the US, when we are helping, there are matching donations from the companies, the double donations. So, while you did the foundation, because having the foundation, running the foundation, spreading the word, we are just putting a cherry on the top, but it's everything is already prepared. So, quite inspiring to see you coming from uh, area which is like, I come from a corporate finance world. I'm kind of still in a corporate finance world, other than by hobby and interest being and jyotishi. uh, I see that it's very difficult to leave that area. So I will just compare and ask you this question. Do you think that do you feel like more satisfied, content, and as compared to a world of corporate finance, and that we cannot tell it to the people who are supporting their family while being in the corporate finance world, that come to Jyotish area and it's pretty good, while what do you find a big difference between being in that world to coming to a completely different world where you are doing Ayurveda and Jyotish, writing books, being a part of your Sri Aurobindo like ashram and doing your work over there? How do you find it comparing each other, and what the people can learn from your own story about this completely different world of inspiration?
Well, I mean, it doesn't. Yes, it is a completely different world in many ways. At the time that I was in corporate America, I was working pretty much 24/7, nonstop, and so there was very little space for you doing things like supporting Dr. Charek's work or studying the Vedic scriptures. But I think more and more, that people are finding balance in their life and they're able to hold down a full-time job while also kind of pursuing some of these spiritual interests or for some of these charitable causes. So I think for me, it was just a matter of realizing that there was a balance that could be had. What I would like to do, if I could, Meenakshi, which is sort of answering your question also, is I kind of dug through some of the old camp pictures and I came across the ones that were, I think it was actually the second camp that I attended back in 2008. And if you don't mind, I can screen share and maybe show a few pictures so everybody here can get a sense and can answer for themselves what it might mean to kind of support a noble cause like this, what the feeling is that you come away from after seeing the work that's being done in these rural areas of India. And so if we have a few minutes,
Yes.
I would love to do that.
Please do it.
Okay.
You are a
Okay.
co-host. You can share your screen.
I'm co-host. Okay. Just give me a second to get this up.
Yep.
And let me know when you can you see that, Meenakshi?
Yes, you can see.
Okay, so let me just kind of put this over here a second. So this was actually my second camp. I went with a dear girlfriend of mine and her son. And as you can see, this was in 2008, and it was in the Mizapur, if I'm saying that right, Mizapur district. And so what would happen is, it happens at all these medical camps, is Dr. Charik would go out a week or 10 days before the camp, before the other medical team would actually arrive. And, he would scope out the area where they're going to do their medical camps, make sure that there's, sufficient facilities around. And he would also get the word out, ask the locals to get the word out about the upcoming medical camp. So typically they would post a sign, and of course, through word of mouth, village after village would hear about this. And by the time that the team would show up, we would have lines and lines and lines of people who had been waiting, sometimes for 2 or 3 days to be seen. This is a small line because this is at the very end of the time that the people were being checked in. But when we got there, there was
Radhe,
at least...
just one thing. Do you like to make the pictures bigger?
How do I make them bigger? They're full on my screen.
You have to just open up. Can you do the double click? I think
it's probably screen share. Let me just do it's probably a screen share thing here.
Small.
Okay, there. Can you see it there?
Yes.
Okay, so it's just a screen share. So I'll just go back. This was the sign. So thanks for mentioning that, Meenakshi. This was the sign that was being put up ahead of time. And then again, the lines of people, there were at least 400 or 500 women and men and children that had been standing in line for a day or two to be seen. This was kind of their one opportunity to, get a dental issue taken care of, or a health issue taken care of. So I'm just going to kind of go through these pictures. They're being here just evaluated again in line. You can see okay, Meenakshi?
Yes, we can. Okay. Yes, very well.
So just to give you a flavor here of what these camps are like, it's absolutely amazing work that's being done in this particular camp. So here's the hall that they set up cots, and each cot had a blanket, and these are the folks that are either getting ready for surgery or coming out of surgery and then being checked on. Where's Dr. Charik? And Dr. Charik, he's not going to like that I have so many pictures of him, but sorry, Dr. Charik. These are the pictures I have. And the team, these are the members of the team. Again, this is probably post-surgery. In this particular camp, they did about 2,000 outdoor attendees that they had. And out of that, they performed just over 100 different surgical treatments. And they actually also had a dentist that came with them. So they did 20 to 25 dental extractions. Probably the first time that many of these people have even had a chance to see a dentist. And here are their supplies. They're getting ready to unpack and get the pharmacy set up. Here we have the pharmacy, medicine for folks. It's just... Here is the washing every evening, the dental garbs or cloth. And this was the team at the end that we took a picture of.
Wow.
So
you can see this, there.
Yeah, this is, so I know I went through that very fast, but I'm hoping everyone got some sense, as if they were there, what it would feel like and be like to see these, folks that haven't had access to medical care, having a whole team of doctors and nurses and dentists and surgeons come in and care to their needs. There's normally, and Dr. Charik could speak more to this, but there's normally, a smaller group team that will stay back 5 or 6 days to make sure that those that had, critical surgery are doing okay. So there's always a few that would stay behind until they kind of went back. And, I will say, Meenakshi, one of the greatest things also is all of these doctors and nurses and surgeons that go, this is their time off that they take, right? They only get so many days off in a year as working for a hospital. They take their personal time to go out and host these medical camps. So this is the dedication that the team has, and Dr. Charik. So it's absolutely amazing. You just walk away from that, just wanting to do whatever you can to provide this sort of care to people in rural places of India.
Lovely. I think sharing picture is actually made the whole concept pretty live. So as you are speaking about medical relief, I did share the screen about going to the website and bringing some information. But as you have experienced it and you are talking about it, it's very inspiring. So I will just I would like to also request Dr. Sharak. Before that, I would like to just ask you one more question. Like we see you know Ayurveda very well. So, do you blend Ayurveda and Jyotish? And does even the consultation comes as a part of you, or do you like also dig further in the horoscope from the Ayurveda and Jyotish, or Ayurveda is different and Jyotish is different for you?
Well, so when I went back for Ayurveda school, Dr. Lad, I was pretty surprised because what I found out, and by this time I had been a Jyotishi for 4 or 5 years, what I found out is that and what I was able to witness and be part of, is that for each Ayurvedic consultation that he would do, and he would do these every Friday for the students, and he would bring the client in or the patient in, that he would not only do the Ayurvedic consultation, but he would put up on the board the birth chart. And he would weave together what he was seeing in the birth chart with the information he was getting from the traditional Ayurvedic consultation. And the same thing when we did the Gurukula program in Pune at his free clinic there, the same thing, lines of people waiting with their charts to come in, where he would integrate both Ayurveda and the birth chart. And so I was thrilled because this was exactly kind of what I was hoping to do after the school. And so I learned a lot from him and how to do that. And then pursuant to that, anyone that was interested in an Ayurvedic consultation, I would also integrate the birth chart reading. So, I'd either do a standalone birth chart, or if they really wanted to also get into health and healing and Ayurveda, then I would integrate the two. And I actually wrote a book on the integration of Ayurveda with the Vedic birth chart, with information and knowledge that I learned not only from Dr. Lad, but also from Dr. Chark and his teachings and his many, many, many medical books. So I do. And I will say now, for the last, which I did want to mention, last 5 years, I'm here now in a small town outside of Greenville, South Carolina. I put on hold my Jyotish and my readings and teachings for the last 5 years because I was asked to take a executive director position here at LaGrasse Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center. It is a Sri Aurobindo dedicated center. You can see Sri Aurobindo and the mother in the back here. So that's really been my full time. I do hope now to start to inch back into Jyotish and Ayurveda. I was never a full, what I would say, Ayurvedic practitioner. I always relied much more on the birth chart, but I learned from Ayurveda things that I could bring in and integrate with the birth chart. So
Lovely. Very lovely to hear your story. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Sharak, as Dr. Sharak is around, to be able to speak a little bit about medical relief. And I also know the camp is coming up, Dr. Sharak, from the medical relief very soon. So first, thanks a lot for taking out time to be here with us. And obviously, we have much more stories, and there are much more questions from you. There are a lot of Jyotish students I see in the background, but will not take your time in terms of Jyotish student. But would like to know from you what how it helped, Radhe being a part of it, and how was your journey? What is your point of view overall about Radhe?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I don't know where to start, but let me mention about her book first and the stories.
Sure.
You see, my stories are confined to the Puranas. I don't go back to the Vedas. her book basically is based on the Vedic knowledge. So Puranic stories are a secondary part of it, as far as I understand. But she has studied the Vedas. I have not had the courage to go into the Vedas yet, and so I am basically confining myself to the Puranas only. And once I am done with that, then probably it will be too late to go to the Vedas. Then maybe during my next birth, I'll think about that.
Wow.
Her book, yeah, her book is great, and in fact, uh, you must read it and then go back and read it again and again and again, and then you will find that many new things will come up every time you read it. So that is great about it. But of course, the stories I pick up from the different Puranas. I've got a collection of them. I have not read all the Puranas yet, but the relevant stories I do pick up, and I do that. This work, medical work, we started in the year 2000, and of course, the purpose was to provide good quality medical care at the doorstep of the patient, and we have succeeded to some extent in that. Uh, One of the great things that has happened is that during this period, I have come across many people who have been, most benevolent, most noble, most beautiful, very great people, and one of them is Radhe. So, and although she says that she is not doing much for our work, but uh, look at how the things would be if she were not there. So she is actually managing everything in USA, and any help that comes to us comes through her. And although different people contribute, but I think the official things that are there in India, if we have too many contributors making small donations, it will be a hell of a job here in India to deal with the officialdom. So the best thing is that she collects whatever donations come, and she contributes herself also, and then we only have to deal with one source of donation from the USA. So that makes our job a lot easier. That is very great. And of course, we have just finished one camp. We finished one, and we had one in November from 6th to 12th November. And I have not yet mailed the camp report, though it is ready with me. So I'm going to do that probably tonight. Tomorrow, within the next 20 hours or so, we should be in the train going on again, going to Mirzapur this time for our 60th camp in the ashram of Hans Baba. And I hope that we'll do some good work there. But it has not been possible without the help of everybody around, and I'm just one small peg in that, who is taking care of the things and hold on to things. But the help comes from everybody who is around, and Radhe, of course, is the most important as far as our things are concerned. And I hope that these things continue as long as we live. So, and I have a very beautiful spiritual connection with her also, and that can be explained on astrological basis. My moon falls in her ninth house, and her moon falls in my ninth house. So we have a spiritual connection also. So I think that is what also binds us together. And so, things go on.
I see, Dr. Charik, that there's a question in the chat box about the fundraising goal for the organization. Do you want to mention the charitable hospital that's underway and the amount that's needed to fund that completion?
Actually, because we have been doing these camps, 3 or 4 camps every year, so there are many more people who need help, and we obviously cannot cater to the demand of everybody. So one plan was to have a hospital where we could provide regular services to the people, and then from there we continue with the camps also. So we have a place where we continue to provide medical services, and continue with the camp activities also. And we you can all understand that there are situations where we cannot do certain surgeries in the camps environment. So those patients can be brought uh, to the basic hospital, and there things can be taken care of. So that was our idea, and we have been trying to raise funds, but then we are quite poor in raising funds. We have had uh, quite a few contributors, but then the amount required is very large, and it runs in several uh, millions of rupees. And you can say we need something like uh, you know uh, I don't know how much that would be in dollars, but we need a few crores, but and a crore is 10 million. So I think we'll need about 20 crores, or you can multiply it there. So that amount we have not been able to raise, and but we are on the job, and I think uh, by now the amount that we have got, if it doubles up, we can start construction of the hospital. So about half the amount of money that we need, close to 5 crores or so, we have got it. And uh, if we have another 5 crores, we can start building the hospital. But we are getting regular help. We have saved all this money from the camps. Whatever is donated to the camps, we uh, save a lot of money from there, because we don't waste any money in the camps. We have all volunteers who come over. We only pay the the laborers and things, but doctors, nurses, and technical people, they are all volunteers. So we save a lot of money from the donations also. So we are trying to collect that. We have selected a piece of land also. We have procured it, and even the architect has made a plan also, and that is there. But yes, we need some funds, and once they are there, I think we should come with the with the hospital. So that is how it is.
I would also like to maybe just mention that for Sanjeevani Foundation, just know that any donations that go to Sanjeevani Foundation, two things. One, 100% of it goes to Dr. Charek's medical camp and towards the reserve for building this charitable hospital. But two, that 99.9% of your donation goes directly to them. There's nobody making money. There's no salary or compensation, no directors being paid. So now and then, every year or two, we may have some legal expenses just to review the foundation, if you will. And I think there was one beautiful film that was done. But for the most part, we are just running it very tight and allowing virtually no expenses to go through, so that each dollar of yours can go to the medical camps.
Yeah, and we would like to also thank many folks in the last 3 years have contributed towards it, and that has also helped us out big time. So, continued donation, continued your words, giving us suggestions and recommendations. How do you think, you can help us out? Also spreading the word about this particular organization will be very, very helpful, because we get to know from the people that there are times Facebook is matching, or the big companies, the Apple is matching, whatever come across you, do send us your suggestion. And even the Arch Jyotish is there to help spread the words, and be there to collect donation. However, just for the convenience of people, we are here to help Dr. Charak. And Dr. Charak has been an inspiration in the world of of astrology. So many books, so many words people like to hear from him. So, as Simon mentions, like one of the legend who is still there around us to be able to give the inspiration. So they take a help and really take a advantage of this and take the knowledge from Dr. Charak. So with that, I will really like to take
Yeah.
few of the questions. Yeah, Dr. Charak, you want to say something? Yes, please.
Yeah. I would also request any of the people around
Sure.
to come over to India and see us actually working. Radhe has done it on a few occasions. We want her to come back also. But anybody who would be interested to see how things go on, I would, invite them whenever they feel like to come over. We are holding one camp now from tomorrow onwards. So obviously that is too early. But we are going to have two more camps in the beginning of the next year. That will be March and April 2023. And I think the first one will be before the Navaratris. So that will be something like, 11th or 12th of March or something like that, a week-long camp, and then another one in April. And then later on, we would hold at least two camps in October and November. There was also a suggestion by somebody that we should, before the hospital comes up or if there is any delay, let us do continuous camps, one after the other with very, very short gaps. We are thinking on that line also. So if possible, we have talked to the I have talked to the Director of Health Services in Jammu, and I have asked him to uh, give us some idea about the number of patients in a certain area in a particular district who need surgery and who have been waiting for surgeries, and we can have a short team which could go there and do surgeries for 7 or 10 days, and if we could get some help from the local authorities who would uh, look after the patients after post-operative patients and give us some help in conducting the surgery, so then we will be able to do work for more people. So that is also we are thinking about. So let us see what actually materializes. And what is great is that this next camp at the place of Hans Baba in Mirzapur in the Vindhyachal, close to the Vindhyachal temple in the ashram of Baba. It will be our 60th camp, 60th. So that will also be a landmark. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharat, for sharing that. So there is people are asking about the link of the book. So it's already there in the chat. You can have a look. But if you do not find it, you can just really go to jyotish.com and the book section. You'll find this Divine Forces of the Lunar Nakshatra book over there. And one very quick thing, do we have an audio version of this book, Radhe, or no?
No, never considered it.
Never considered.
No, I think all the ancient scriptures were written, and that's how I did this research. So at least for now, and it's a great reference. It's easy to reference. So if I do something in audio, where do I go back to find this chapter or that? So I think it's a little bit easier as a reference guide. But if there's enough people that are interested, I would certainly do what I could to help out there.
Maybe the second edition or something else is coming up, so at that time you can.
Second edition, oh no.
No. Yeah, you talked about some comparison of the nakshatras, like, so we will look up.
Yeah, side research.
Oh, thank you for considering that. So if not, I will not take a lot of time of everyone over here. We would like to move to close the session. Definitely it's been close to 90 minutes where Radhe has been explaining and talking about all of this. So Christine has asked a question, and we will get back to you, Christine, with that answer, because that question is taking us more deep into the book, and it will take some time for Radhe to be able to look into. So we will not be able to take, Christine, that question, but while I will get back to you with the answer from Radhe. So with that, we would like to close the session for today. So we'd like to thank Dr. Charak for being here
Thank
with
you.
the graceful presence, and definitely like to thank Radhe for talking to us and being around with us in terms of the knowledge, as well as so many people wants to like know you, like who you are, who has written this book, you know. So being so that itself is, and there is also confusion with the name, like is this Radhe, so given all of that, so thanks a lot to talking to us. And there are many people watching us also on the YouTube right now, and that will continue, also it will go on, as more and more people are coming on the site, more the masses they are getting. So with that, we'd like to close the session with a very quick closing mantra. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudakshate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. So thank you everyone for joining. And with that, we'll close the session. We'll let
Thank
Radhe
you.
and Dr. Charak go,
Thank you.
and yeah, give everybody another 5 minutes here. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Meenakshi, again for all that you do for Samjeevani and Dr. Charak's medical camps. Really appreciate it. And your team there, you have, I know, others around you that are helping. So very, very
Thank you.
much appreciate it.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Charak. Thank you, Radhe. Thank you everyone for being here.
Hi, Dr. Charak.
Yes.
Nice to see you. Namaste.
Good. Good. Okay. Goodbye.